Hey everybody, so I have my buddy Eric's stump jumper in the stand here. He's been complaining about some weird shifting issues. Now, I don't exactly know what the issue is yet, but I figured this could be a good chance to make a video that walks through my typical troubleshooting process. Okay, so first I'm just going to run through the gears and kind of just see where we're at. It's weird. Right off the bat, I can actually tell that the derailleur itself is actually loose. Now that's definitely going to be a problem, but rather than tighten it down, I'm actually going to take the derailleur off. And I'm going to make sure that the hanger is straight. So the derailleur hanger is this sort of sacrificial piece of metal that attaches to the frame, but it's a softer metal. So if you crash and you hit your derailleur hard, you end up bending the hanger and not the frame itself. Then the idea is you can replace the hanger for really cheap rather than having to replace your whole frame. But I think what a lot of people skip is to make sure that this is absolutely straight. And so really the only way to make sure that your derailleur hanger is straight is to use a hanger alignment tool like this one here. Basically thread in this end of the hanger adjustment tool. What you basically have is this sort of plunger or feeler gauge, which can give you the distance from the sort of central shaft to a point on the rim anywhere around the circumference of the rim. So we'll start at the top. You can push the sort of memory lock, or this O-ring, it's basically just an O-ring, and then you'll slowly push it until it just barely makes contact with the rim. Now we're using the rim because the rim is a representative plane for the plane of the bike. So if we can get our derailleur hanger aligned to be parallel with the plane of the rim, then we're in good shape. We'll start with this distance at the top. You pull that back and then swing it to the bottom, and then see if you're the same distance away, which we are not. So there's a shorter distance from the rim to the tool on the bottom than there is on the top. So what you basically do is you just use the tool itself to bend the hanger in the direction that you need. So once you do that, you'll reset the memory lock or the O-ring, push it in again, and then go back to the top and check to see if you are aligned. So that's looking a lot better. So we're now aligned about the horizontal axis. Now we need to check to see if we're aligned about the vertical axis. And there we go. So now we're aligned in both axes. Now it doesn't really matter, you know, whether you pick up and down or diagonal. What really matters is that the 2 points that you check are orthogonal to each other. So as long as you pick two axes that are perpendicular to one another, you should be able to align your hanger without any issues. Okay, so with the hanger aligned, we'll now go ahead and reinstall the derailleur. I am noticing a little bit of jittering, and I think it has to do with the B-screw adjustment. I think one of the jockey wheels is getting pretty close to one of the cogs. So we're going to go ahead and make that adjustment next. What we want to do is put it into the largest cog. We want there to be about 5 to 6 millimeters of spacing between the teeth on the jockey wheel here and the largest cog on the cassette. Right now it's looking like we're pretty close, so we want to probably bring that out just a little bit. And so to do that, we're going to use the B-screw adjustment, which is right here. And so we want to turn it clockwise to increase that gap and be counterclockwise to decrease that gap. Now there's actually a tool that you can use to clip onto the cog and use it as a gauge. But I just want to use this Allen wrench to bring that gap out a few more millimeters, like so. And then we can run through the gears again and see where we're at. And what I'm looking for here really is to make sure that the jockey wheels aren't riding super close to any one of the cogs on the cassette. Okay, so that's looking a little bit better. What we need to do next is actually to index the gears, which is to adjust the left and right increment to make sure that regardless of what gear we're in, the cog is aligned with the jockey wheel. Okay, so to do that, what we're actually going to do is to put it into the second to smallest cog on the cassette. And the reason we're going to do that is because indexing the system has to do with how much cable tension is in the system. Now, for the middle 10 cogs, the cable tension is directly proportional to the placement of the jockey wheel with respect to the cog. However, for the smallest cog and the largest cog, the position of the jockey wheel is a function of both the cable tension and the upper and lower limit screws. So in order to properly index the gears, we want to be in a cog that's not the highest and the lowest gear. Now it's probably tough to see on video, but I can look from the back of the bike looking forward, and I can see just visually that the jockey wheel is biased a little bit to the right of that cog. And what that means is that there's not quite enough tension in the system, and we need to pull that jockey wheel a little bit further inboard. But to do that, we can generally use the barrel adjuster, which is the sort of threaded knob at the shifter. And we can turn that counterclockwise to pull out some of the slack and bring the derailleur inboard. Now each time you make a change to the tension, you should give it a shift up and then back down to sort of let it settle into place. Okay, so looking at it now, it looks like we are much more in line, which is good. Now I'm going to just run through the middle 10 cogs to see where we're at with the shifting. If you find that it's hesitating to move from a smaller cog into a larger cog, what that means is that you need to put a little bit more tension into the system, which means turning the barrel adjuster counterclockwise. If you're finding that it's hesitating to go from bigger cogs to smaller cogs, that could mean that there's a little bit too much tension in the system, and you want to go ahead and turn the barrel adjuster in clockwise. And you'll do this maybe a quarter turn at a time until there's no hesitation going up and down the middle 10 gears of the cassette. Alright, so that's looking a lot better. Now what we're going to do is deal with the upper and lower limit screws. Now the high and low limit screws serve to sort of provide an end stop to the derailleur so that your chain doesn't fall off the big gear and into the spokes, and also so that it doesn't fall off the small gear and scrape up your frame. So we'll just do these one at a time. I'm first going to shift down into the smallest gear. Okay, and so it won't actually shift into the small gear. So what that tells me is that the high limit screw is adjusted too far in. So in this case, because I want the limit to be set further outboard, I'm going to turn the high limit screw counterclockwise. And I'll start with about one full turn since it wasn't even trying to shift into the small cog. Okay, so right away we're able to shift into the small cog, and I can pretty smoothly go from the small cog to the second to smallest cog, and then back down. I'm just looking at the alignment here to make sure that that jockey wheel is aligned with the smallest cog. I might have gone a little bit too far on the limit screw. I'm just going to kind of bring that high limit screw in just until it starts hesitating to come back down into the small cog, and then I'll back it off about 1/8 or 1/4 of a turn. Okay, so there's a little bit of hesitation now. So I'm going to bring that high limit screw out about 1/4 of a turn. That should be all we need. Okay, now it's no surprise, it's the exact same process for the big cog. And you're just going to use that low limit screw to make sure you set that boundary so the chain can't really fall off the high side of the cassette. Okay, so that's clearly way better than it was when we first started. It's still hesitating in a couple of random spots. So one other thing that I like to do, and this is kind of a relic from older days, I actually like to lube up the pivot points on the derailleur and lube up the chain just to eliminate any friction that could be causing those shifting hesitations. Now I know some of you are probably going to yell at me for this, but in my opinion there's nothing wrong with using a little WD-40 on all the pivot points on the derailleur. And there are generally 8 pivot points that you should lube up. I just like the WD-40 because it kind of foams up and penetrates and gets in there real easy. And I've been doing it this way for a long time, and it just works. Okay, it may not be the most optimal solution, but it gets the job done. Okay, so this is the other thing that you're probably going to yell at me for. The chain is pretty clean, it's just really dry. So I know I should take the chain off, do a full degrease on it, and then re-lube it. But you know, it's all a balance. And in this case, I just feel like the pros of lubing up the chain as is are far going to outweigh any of the cons. Now, I know you can't really hear it or feel it, but that is just so much better. Okay, so there you have it. That's my process on troubleshooting weird shifting issues. To summarize, make sure that the derailleur itself is tight, make sure that the hanger is aligned, make sure to adjust the B limit screw, index the gears, and then check the high and low limit screws. And as a bonus, you can lube up the pivot points on the derailleur to make it nice and smooth again, and of course lube the chain. Now if you've tried all those things and you're still shifting rough, it could be that your chain is worn out, and you can check the chain for any stretch by using a dedicated gauge or just a ruler and a careful eye. Now in this case, I know Eric's bike is pretty new, so I didn't suspect that there was any chain stretch, and trying all the things that we did helped tremendously, so there's no need to replace the chain or the cassette in this case. Alright, well that's going to do it for this one. I hope it was helpful. Thanks again for watching, and thanks for subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.